The great chamber of Axiom Prime was silent. 200 species sat in their designated seats, arranged in circles that rose toward a ceiling made of transparent crystal. Beyond that ceiling, stars burned in the endless black of space. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone at the central podium, feeling the weight of those alien eyes pressing down on her. She had represented humanity for 15 years. She had smiled through insults. She had accepted unfair treaties. She had watched her species be treated like children who had stumbled into a room full of adults. And through it all, she had waited. They had all waited. The Speaker of the Council, a tall Velkari named Archon Thress, looked down at her from his elevated platform. His gray skin was stretched tight over sharp bones, and his 4 eyes gleamed with barely hidden contempt. The Velkari had ruled this council for 3,000 years, and they had never learned to hide their arrogance. Ambassador Vasquez, Thress said, his voice echoing through translation devices around the chamber. The council has reviewed the evidence. Human vessels attacked and destroyed a Velkari merchant convoy in the neutral corridor. 47 Velkari citizens are dead. Elena kept her face calm. Archon Thress, humanity denies any involvement in this incident. We have requested access to the sensor data and debris field for our own investigation. That request has been denied. The evidence is clear, Thress replied. The council does not require human approval to reach its conclusions. A clicking sound came from the Thrixian section. Queen Vethys, ruler of the Thrixian collective, rose from her seat. She was insectoid, with a hard shell of deep purple and mandibles that never stopped moving. The Thrixian collective supports the Velkari assessment. Humanity has always been aggressive. It was only a matter of time before their violent nature revealed itself. Elena wanted to laugh. The Thrixians had conquered 12 species before joining the council. They had eaten some of their enemies. But somehow, humanity was the violent one. What does the council propose? Elena asked, though she already knew. Thress activated a holographic display. It showed human space, their colonies, their trade routes. Red markers appeared on every significant location. For the safety of the galactic community, humanity must accept the following terms. First, all human military vessels will be surrendered to Council control within 30 standard days. Second, Council peacekeeping forces will be stationed on all human worlds. Third, human expansion beyond current borders is permanently forbidden. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Elena noticed that many of the smaller species looked uncomfortable. The Fenari delegation, small mammalian creatures with large ears, were whispering urgently among themselves. The Kroth, beings of living stone, sat perfectly still, but their crystal eyes were fixed on her with something that might have been sympathy. And if humanity refuses these terms? Elena asked. Then the council will take corrective action, Thress said. The threat was clear. War. Elena nodded slowly. I must consult with Earth. How long do we have? 72 standard hours, Thress said. The council is generous. Elena bowed her head slightly, playing the part of the defeated diplomat one last time. Humanity thanks the council for its generosity. She walked out of the chamber with measured steps. She did not look back. She did not let her expression change until she was inside the human embassy and the doors had sealed behind her. Her aide, a young man named David Chen, was waiting. Ambassador? What happened? Elena walked past him toward the secure communication room. They finally did it. They finally pushed too far. The communication room was shielded against every form of surveillance known to galactic science, plus a few that humanity had developed in secret. Elena activated the quantum link to Earth and waited. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral James Okonkwo, commander of Earth Defense Forces. Ambassador, he said. We monitored the session. I assume they gave us impossible terms. Complete disarmament and occupation. Elena confirmed. 72 hours to comply. Okonkwo nodded. His dark face was calm, but Elena could see the fire in his eyes. He had spent 30 years building something in secret, and now he would finally get to use it. The Velkari manufactured this crisis. Our intelligence assets intercepted their communications last month. They want our jump lanes. I know, Elena said. The question is, are we ready? We've been ready for 40 years, Okonkwo replied. We just needed them to make the first move. Now they have. Elena thought about the history that had led to this moment. When humanity first made contact with the galaxy, they had been naive. They had believed that advanced civilizations would be peaceful, rational, fair. They had been wrong. The Galactic Council was a hierarchy of predators. The strong dominated the weak. The Velkari and Thrixians sat at the top, taking what they wanted, crushing any species that challenged them. Humanity had been admitted to the Council 200 years ago, but only as a minor member with no real power. They had been given the worst trade agreements. Their colonies had been restricted to undesirable systems. Their people had been treated with casual contempt, and humanity had accepted it all. They had smiled and nodded and said thank you, because they had learned something important from their own history. They had learned that sometimes the best strategy was to appear weak while building strength in secret. Protocol Prometheus, Elena said. It's time. I'll begin mobilization immediately, Okonkwo said. What about you? Can you get off the station safely? I'm not leaving, Elena replied. When the Council realizes what's happening, they'll want someone to talk to. That should be me. They might take you hostage. Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. They can try. I think they'll find that hostage-taking works better when the other side is afraid. After the communication ended, Elena stood alone in the dark room for a long moment. She thought about her grandmother, who had been alive when humanity first joined the Council. Her grandmother had told her stories about those early days, about the hope they had felt, about how quickly that hope had turned to disappointment. We tried to be good neighbors, her grandmother had said. We tried to fit in, but they never let us. They looked at us and saw primitives from a death world, too stupid and savage to matter, so we stopped trying to change their minds. We started preparing for the day when they would force our hand. That day had come. Elena left the communication room and found David waiting anxiously. Ambassador, what do we do? We wait, Elena said. And when they come demanding our answer, we give them one they never expected. The next 3 days were tense. Council representatives came to the embassy demanding updates. Elena told them that Earth was still deliberating. She asked for extensions. She played the role of a desperate diplomat trying to avoid war. The Velkari and Thrixians grew more confident with each passing hour. They had seen this before. Smaller species always gave in eventually. On the final day, Elena received word from Earth. Operation Prometheus was complete. The galaxy was about to change forever. Archon Thress summoned her back to the council chamber. This time, there were armed guards at every entrance. The Velkari were taking no chances. They expected humanity to surrender, but they were prepared for defiance. Ambassador Vasquez, Thress said, your time has expired. What is humanity's answer? Elena looked around the chamber. She saw the Fenari, who had always been kind to human visitors. She saw the Kroth, who had secretly traded technology with Earth for decades. She saw the Melodari, whose merchant ships had carried hidden messages between human colonies. So many species, watching and waiting to see what would happen. Humanity's answer, Elena said, is no. The chamber erupted in noise. Thress raised his hand for silence, his 4 eyes narrowing. You refuse? You understand what this means? I understand exactly what it means, Elena said. You manufactured a crisis to justify stealing our territory. You expected us to surrender, because that's what we've always done. You thought we were weak. You are weak. Queen Vethys's clicked. Your species is young. Your technology is inferior. Your population is small. You cannot win a war against the Council. Elena smiled. You're right about some of that. We are young. Our population is smaller than many species here. But you made a mistake that many have made throughout our history. You assumed that because we chose peace, we couldn't wage war. She touched a control on her wrist. Every display screen in the chamber flickered and changed. They now showed images from the edge of human space, where a council fleet of 400 warships had been gathering for the past 3 days, waiting to enforce the ultimatum. Those 400 ships were now surrounded. 3,000 human vessels had emerged from hidden positions throughout the sector. They were sleek and angular, designed for war rather than diplomacy. Their weapons were already powered, their shields already raised. They had appeared without warning from asteroid belts in empty space, from places where the Council's sensors showed nothing at all. The chamber fell completely silent. For 200 years, Elena said, we built in secret. We developed technology we never showed you. We constructed shipyards in places you never thought to look. We made friends among the species you ignored. And we waited for you to make exactly this mistake. On the screens, a message was being broadcast from the human fleet. Admiral Okonkwo's voice filled the council chamber. Council Fleet, this is Admiral James Okonkwo of Earth Defense Forces. We don't want war, but we will never accept subjugation. You have 1 hour to power down your weapons and withdraw to council space. If you attack, we will defend ourselves. There will be no second warning. Elena looked up at Archon Thress. The Velkari's gray skin had gone pale. For the first time in his long life, he was experiencing something unfamiliar. He was afraid. 72 hours, Elena said softly. The council was so generous. Now it's our turn to be generous. 1 hour, Archon. Choose wisely. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, chaos erupted as 200 species tried to understand how everything they thought they knew had just changed. Outside, David was waiting. His face was pale, but he was smiling. It's really happening, he said. We're really doing this. We're really doing this, Elena confirmed. She looked up through a viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, humanity's hidden fleet was waiting. 200 years of patience, 200 years of planning, and finally, the chance to show the galaxy what humans were really capable of. They made their choice, she said quietly. Now they'll see what happens when they push too far. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Unconquered, humanity's flagship. Around him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for decades. Now, it was here. On the main display, 400 Council warships held position at the edge of human space. They were impressive vessels, built by species with thousands of years of technological advancement. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could withstand nuclear strikes. They had conquered dozens of species over the millennia, and they were completely outmatched. All ships report ready, Admiral, Commander Sarankomo said from her station. Stealth systems are holding. The Council fleet still doesn't know our exact positions. Okonkwo nodded. He thought about the path that had led humanity here. When Earth first made contact with the galaxy, they had been overwhelmed by alien technology. The Council species had ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. They had weapons that made human nuclear arsenals look like toys. They had looked at humanity and seen primitives barely worth noticing. That had been their first mistake. Humanity had accepted the role of minor council member. They had signed unfair treaties and agreed to restrictions on their expansion. They had sent their brightest scientists to study at alien universities and work in alien laboratories. The Council thought they were training obedient servants. They were actually creating the foundation for humanity's hidden military. The scientists came home with knowledge. They shared what they learned with secret research facilities hidden throughout human space. Earth's governments had put aside their old conflicts and united behind a single purpose. They had built a shadow military, constructed in asteroid belts and artificial caverns, hidden from Council sensors by technology that humanity had developed in secret. The Council fleet commander is hailing us, the communications officer announced. Put him through, Okonkwo said. A Velkari face appeared on screen. Admiral Voss was old for his species, his gray skin wrinkled and spotted. He had led Council fleets for 300 years and had never lost a battle. His 4 eyes blazed with contempt. Human, Voss said, the translator rendering his words in flat tones. This display changes nothing. Your ships may outnumber ours, but your technology is inferior. Your crews are inexperienced. If you attack, you will be destroyed. We have no intention of attacking, Okonkwo replied calmly. We want you to leave. Go home. Tell the Council that humanity will not be conquered. You speak of what you want, Voss sneered. I speak of what will happen. In 1 hour, my fleet will advance. Your ships will surrender or be destroyed. Your colonies will be occupied. Your species will learn its proper place. Admiral Voss, Okonkwo said. In my people's history, we have a saying, pride goes before the fall. I suggest you reconsider. Voss terminated the connection. Okonkwo turned to his bridge crew. They're not going to back down. They can't. If they retreat without firing a shot, the Council loses all credibility. Every species they've bullied will start thinking they can resist too. Then we'll have to convince them another way, Commander Nkomo said. What are your orders? Okonkwo studied the tactical display. 400 council ships against 3,000 human vessels. The numbers favored humanity. But Voss was partly right. Human crews had never fought a real space battle. Their ships had never been tested against council weapons. There were 1,000 things that could go wrong, but there were things the council didn't know. Things that would change everything. Signal all ships, Okonkwo said. Formation Omega. When they attack, we respond with precision strikes only. Target weapons and engines. Disable. Don't destroy. Don't destroy? Nkomo looked surprised. Admiral? They're here to conquer us. I know, Okonkwo said. But we're not here to start a war of extermination. We're here to send a message. And the message has to be clear. We could destroy them. We choose not to. That's the difference between us and them. The hour passed slowly. Okonkwo watched the council fleet make its final preparations. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met something they couldn't kill. Voss arranged his ships in a classic council attack formation, with heavy cruisers in the center and faster vessels on the flanks. It was a formation designed to overwhelm inferior enemies through sheer firepower. They're powering weapons, Nkomo reported. I'm reading energy signatures across the fleet. Hold formation, Okonkwo ordered. Wait for them to fire first. I want no doubt about who started this. The first shots came at exactly the 1 hour mark. Council ships opened fire with plasma cannons and particle beams, weapons that had shattered the defenses of a dozen species. Bright streams of energy crossed the space between the fleets, aimed at the human ships that had been visible on sensors. Those ships weren't there anymore. The human fleet had shifted position in the final seconds, using maneuvering systems that the Council didn't know existed. The Council weapons hit empty space. And then the human fleet responded. Okonkwo had spent decades studying Council technology. He knew their shields had weak points where the generators overlapped. He knew their weapons needed time to recharge between shots. He knew that their sensor systems had blind spots that human stealth technology could exploit. He had designed his fleet specifically to exploit every weakness. Human ships fired focused energy beams at precisely targeted points on Council vessels. Shields flickered and failed. Secondary shots disabled weapon systems. Third shots took out engines. Each human ship coordinated with others, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no angle of escape. The Council fleet tried to respond, but their enemies kept disappearing from sensors, reappearing in unexpected positions, striking from angles that should have been impossible. Voss screamed orders, but his ships couldn't adapt to an enemy that fought like ghosts. 11 minutes after the first shot, it was over. 400 Council warships drifted dead in space. Their weapons were slag. Their engines were cold. Their shields were gone, but their life support was intact. Their crews were alive. Not a single Council vessel had been destroyed. Okonkwo let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then he opened a channel. Admiral Voss, your fleet is disabled. Your crews are unharmed. Rescue ships are being dispatched from Council space. They will arrive in 6 hours. A long pause. Then Voss appeared on screen. His face was pale. His 4 eyes were wide with shock. This is impossible. Our technology is superior. Our experience is greater. How did you do this? You had 3,000 years to innovate, Okonkwo said. You didn't. You sat at the top of the food chain and got comfortable. We had 200 years of desperation. We spent every moment preparing for the day when we would have to fight for our survival. Today was that day. You've made a terrible mistake, Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. The Council will never accept this. More fleets will come. Larger fleets. You cannot defeat the entire galaxy. We don't want to defeat the galaxy, Okonkwo replied. We want to be left alone. We want to be treated as equals. We want the Council to stop bullying smaller species and start acting with basic decency. That's all we've ever wanted. Then why spare us? Voss asked. Why not destroy my fleet and send a stronger message? Okonkwo leaned forward. Because we're not like you. We don't kill when we don't have to. We don't conquer because we can. We defend ourselves, and then we offer peace. That's the difference between humanity and the Council. Voss stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in those 4 eyes. It might have been the beginning of respect. The Council will not see it that way. Voss said finally. They will see only that they were humiliated. They will want revenge. Then they'll get another lesson, Okonkwo said. And another. As many as it takes. We have patience. We've been practicing it for 2 centuries. He ended the transmission and turned to his bridge crew. They were staring at him with expressions of disbelief and wonder. They had just witnessed the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Signal Ambassador Vasquez, Okonkwo ordered. Tell her the first phase is complete. The galaxy just learned that humanity is done playing nice. Now comes the hard part. The hard part? Nkomo asked. Making them understand that we don't want to be their enemies. Okonkwo said. We just want to be free. That's a message that might take a while to sink in. In the debris field of the disabled Council fleet, rescue beacons began to activate. Velkari and Thrixian crew members waited in darkened ships for help to arrive. Many of them had never experienced defeat before. They had been taught that the Council was invincible, that lesser species could never challenge their power. That belief had died in 11 minutes. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species with access to information networks saw the footage. 400 Council warships, the pride of Velkari engineering, disabled without a single casualty on either side. 3,000 human ships appearing from nowhere, moving with impossible precision, disappearing like phantoms. On dozens of worlds, species that had suffered under Council rule watched the footage again and again. The Fenari, whose homeworld had been stripped of resources by Velkari mining corporations. The Kroth, whose ancient territories had been taken by Thrixian expansion. The Silicates, who existed as second-class members of the Council despite being older than most other species. They all watched, and they all understood. The galaxy was changing. The old order was cracking, and humanity had just announced that it was done being afraid. On Axiom Prime, Ambassador Elena Vasquez received Okonkwo's message. She smiled as she read it. Around her, the station was in chaos. Council representatives were demanding explanations. Velkari officials were threatening retaliation. Thrixian warriors were calling for immediate mobilization. And in the corners of the station, representatives of smaller species were having quiet conversations, making plans, considering possibilities that had seemed impossible just a few hours ago. Elena sent a response to Okonkwo. Well done, Admiral. Phase 2 begins now. Let's show them what kind of future we're offering. She walked to her office and began drafting messages. The Council had pushed too far, and humanity had pushed back. But winning a battle wasn't the same as winning a war. The real challenge was just beginning. In the black between stars, human ships took up patrol positions. They didn't advance into Council space. They didn't threaten other worlds. They simply held their ground and waited. The message was clear. We will not conquer you. We will not bully you. But we will not be conquered or bullied either. The galaxy had never seen anything quite like it. Most species, when they gained power, used it to dominate others. Humanity had gained power and was using it to demand equality. It was a concept that many Council species struggled to understand, but the smaller species understood, and they were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Admiral Okonkwo returned to his quarters after the battle. He was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. He kept thinking about the future, about all the challenges that still lay ahead. The Council wouldn't accept this defeat easily. There would be more battles, more diplomatic crises, more tests of human resolve. But they had passed the first test. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be pushed around, and they had done it without becoming the monsters they were fighting against. That, he thought, was the real victory. Not the battle itself, but the way they had fought it. With restraint, with precision, with mercy. It was the beginning of something new. Something that might just change the galaxy forever. The news spread like fire through dry grass. Within days, every inhabited world in the galaxy knew what had happened at the edge of human space. The details varied, depending on who was telling the story. Some versions claimed humanity had destroyed the entire Council fleet. Others said the humans had used some kind of forbidden weapon. A few even suggested that humanity had made contact with a more advanced species and was using alien technology. The truth was somehow more frightening than any of the rumors. Humanity had simply been smarter, faster, and more prepared than anyone had imagined. They had hidden their true capabilities for 2 centuries while the Council dismissed them as primitives. And when the time came, they had revealed a military force that outclassed the supposedly superior Council species. On the Velkari homeworld, Archon Thres faced a council of angry leaders. They sat in a chamber of black stone, beneath a ceiling painted with scenes of Velkari conquests, stretching back thousands of years. Every one of those conquests had been easy. Every enemy had fallen before Velkari might. Until now, we must strike back immediately, War Leader Kos demanded. His 4 eyes burned with fury. Mobilize the full fleet. Every warship we have. We will crush these humans and burn their worlds to cinders. And how many ships do we have available? Asked Merchant Prime Velis, an older Velkari whose skin had faded to pale gray. How many crews? How many resources? The fleet Admiral Voss led represented half our active military. They were disabled in 11 minutes. Then we rebuild and try again, Kos said. We have the shipyards. We have the technology. Do we? Thres spoke for the first time. Our technology proved useless against human weapons. Our sensors couldn't track their movements. Our shields couldn't stop their attacks. What good is rebuilding ships that will simply be disabled again? Silence fell over the chamber. This was the question none of them wanted to answer. For 3,000 years, the Velkari had ruled through technological superiority. They had always been 1 step ahead of every other species. The idea that someone had overtaken them without their knowledge was almost impossible to accept. There must be a way, Kos insisted. No species develops that level of advancement in 2 centuries. They must have weaknesses we haven't discovered yet. Perhaps, Thres said. But before we can discover those weaknesses, we have another problem. The galaxy is watching. Every species that ever resented our dominance is now asking the same question. If humans can resist the Council, why can't we? On the Thrixian throne world, Queen Vethis faced a similar situation. Her advisors clicked and chittered around her, their mandibles expressing various degrees of fear and anger. The Thrixian collective had always been the Council's enforcers. When other species needed to be reminded of their place, it was Thrixian warriors who delivered that reminder. Now the warriors themselves had been humiliated. Our alliance with the Velkari must hold, First Advisor Chris said. Together, our combined fleets still outnumber the humans 10-1. Numbers meant nothing in the first battle. Vethis replied. The humans didn't win through numbers. They won through technology and tactics. Until we can match those, more ships are meaningless. Then what does your majesty suggest? Vethis considered carefully. She had ruled the collective for 300 years. She had survived countless plots and challenges. She had built the Thrixian military into the most feared force in Council space, and she had just watched a species her people had dismissed as irrelevant make that military look like primitive savages. We wait, she said finally. We watch, we learn, and we look for opportunities. The humans have made a bold move, but bold moves create openings. When they make a mistake, we will be ready. Far from the Council homeworlds, other species were having very different conversations. On Fenara, the homeworld of the Fenari, a council of elders gathered in a forest clearing. The Fenari were small beings, covered in soft fur, with large ears that could hear sounds from miles away. They had been council members for 1,000 years, but they had never had real power. Their world had been exploited, their resources taken, their opinions ignored. Elder Mika stood before the council, her silver fur glinting in the filtered sunlight. You have all seen the recordings. The humans did what no one believed possible. They stood against the council and won. One battle is not a war, another elder cautioned. The council still has vast resources. When they recover from their shock, they will strike back. And the humans may not be so fortunate next time. Perhaps, Mika agreed. But consider this. After the battle, the humans did not advance. They did not attack council worlds. They did not make threats or demands. They simply held their ground and asked to be treated as equals. When have the Velkari or Thrixians ever shown such restraint? Murmurs rippled through the council. It was true. In their long experience with council species, the Fenari had learned that power always led to abuse. Those who could dominate others did. It was simply how the galaxy worked. But humanity seemed different. I have received a message, Mika continued. From Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She asks if the Finari would be interested in opening direct diplomatic relations with Earth. Not through the Council. Direct contact between our species. The silence that followed was heavy with significance. Direct contact outside Council channels was technically forbidden. It was one of the many rules the Council used to maintain control over smaller species. But what could the Council do now? They had just been humiliated by humanity. Their authority was crumbling. What would such relations involve? An elder asked. Trade, Mika said. Technology sharing, mutual defense agreements, and most importantly, a voice. The humans want to reform the Council. They want smaller species to have real representation. They want to end the dominance of the Velkari and Thrixians. They want allies, another elder said. They want us to stand with them against the Council. Yes, Mika acknowledged. They do. And in return, they offer something we have never had. Respect, equality, partnership. The question is whether we are brave enough to accept. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. The Kroth, beings of living stone who had been conquered by the Thrixians centuries ago, debated whether to reach out to humanity. The Silicates, ancient crystalline entities who had grown tired of council politics, considered offering technical assistance to Earth. The Melodari, a species of traders who had secretly helped humanity for decades, began openly discussing alliance. On Axiom Prime, Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched these developments with careful attention. She spent her days in meetings, receiving delegations from species who had never bothered to speak with humanity before. The same officials who had looked through her for 15 years now sought her opinion on everything from trade policy to military strategy. It would have been satisfying if it weren't so dangerous. The Velkari are too quiet, she told Admiral Okonkwo during one of their secure communications. They should be threatening us, demanding our surrender, mobilizing for war. Instead, they're just waiting. They're planning something. Okonkwo agreed. The question is what? My intelligence sources say there's serious debate within their leadership. Some want immediate retaliation. Others want to negotiate. The problem is that neither faction can accept what happened. Their entire civilization is built on the idea that they're superior to everyone else. We just proved they're not. How do you think they'll resolve it? Elena considered the question. She had studied Velkari psychology for decades. She understood their pride, their arrogance, their absolute conviction that they deserve to rule. They'll try something clever, something that lets them save face while still hurting us. A direct attack would be too obvious, and after what happened to their fleet, they know it might not work, so they'll look for another approach. Any ideas what that might be? Several, Elena said grimly. None of them good. A week later, her fears were confirmed. A single human stealth ship, operating deep in Council space on an intelligence mission, detected something unusual. A large Velkari fleet was gathering, but not at the border with human space. Instead, it was assembling near the Meridian system, one of humanity's most vulnerable colonies. Meridian 7 was an agricultural world, home to 2 million humans. It produced food for a dozen other colonies and was considered essential to humanity's long-term expansion. It was also lightly defended, with only a small garrison and aging orbital platforms. The perfect target for a species that wanted to hurt humanity without facing their main fleet. Elena received the intelligence report and immediately contacted Earth. They're going to hit Meridian, a surprise attack while our fleet is focused on the border. If they succeed, they prove we can't protect our people. They embarrass us in front of our potential allies, and they kill millions of civilians to send a message. How long do we have? The president of Earth asked. Days, maybe less. Our fleet can't reach Meridian in time if they attack now. Then we need to find another way to defend it. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about the people of Meridian 7. Farmers, families, children, people who had moved to the frontier to build new lives. People who had no idea they were about to become targets in a galactic war. There might be a way, she said slowly. Meridian was the site of our first military academy. 50 years ago, it trained the officers who would eventually build our secret fleet. Those officers retired all over human space, but many of them settled on Meridian. They wanted to be close to where their careers began. Veterans, the president said, understanding. How many? 50,000, last count. Old soldiers, Pilots, engineers, people who spent their lives preparing for exactly this kind of crisis. Elena's voice hardened. The Velkari think Meridian is defenseless. They're about to learn that humanity doesn't have defenseless worlds. Just worlds where the defenses aren't obvious. The message went out to Meridian within the hour. Across the colony, retired warriors received the alert. Old uniforms came out of storage. Weapons that had been carefully maintained despite years of peace were checked and loaded. Defense networks that had been installed during the Academy's operation and never removed were activated. The people of Meridian 7 had been farmers for a generation. But before that, they had been soldiers. And soldiers never truly retired. They just waited for the call. On the Velkari command ship approaching Meridian, Admiral Voss's replacement studied his tactical displays with satisfaction. This attack would be his redemption. Where Voss had failed, he would succeed. The humans would learn that their victory at the border was a fluke. The galaxy would see that the Velkari were still the dominant power. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The stage was set. The Council had pushed too far, and now they were about to discover just how far humanity would go to protect its own. The galaxy held its breath. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. The attack on Meridian 7 began at dawn. 300 Council warships dropped out of hyperspace above the peaceful agricultural world. Their commander, Admiral Kreth, expected an easy victory. Intelligence reports showed minimal defenses. The human main fleet was positioned at the border, too far away to respond in time. By the time they arrived, Meridian would be occupied and its population would be hostages. Begin orbital bombardment of military installations, Kreth ordered. Then land troops in the major settlements. His weapons officers locked onto targets and fired. Plasma bolts rained down toward the surface. This was how the Velkari had conquered dozens of worlds. Overwhelming force from above, followed by ground troops to secure the survivors. It had never failed. The plasma bolts never reached their targets. Hidden beneath Meridian's surface, generators that had been dormant for decades roared to life. A planetary shield flickered into existence, covering the major population centers. The orbital bombardment splashed harmlessly against the energy barrier. "What is this?" Kreth demanded. Intelligence said they had no planetary shields. "Sir, we're detecting power signatures across the surface. Multiple military installations are coming online." And the sensor officer's voice trailed off in disbelief. "Sir, we're reading weapons platforms in the orbital debris field. They were disguised as defunct satellites. Those weapons platforms opened fire. Not the sophisticated attacks of the human main fleet, but older systems that still packed a devastating punch. Council ships shuddered under the impact. Shields flickered. Several vessels lost engines. On the surface, the people of Meridian 7 were already fighting. General Marcus Chen, retired for 15 years, stood in the command center beneath the capital city. Around him, veterans who had thought their fighting days were over worked stations with the precision of professionals. They were old, some of them in their 70s and 80s, but they remembered their training, and they were defending their homes. "All defensive sectors report ready," his aide announced. "Ground forces are moving to intercept landing zones." Chen studied the tactical display. The Council fleet was larger than they had expected, but the ground forces were smaller. Kreth had assumed there would be nothing to fight. He was about to learn otherwise. "Let them land," Chen ordered. "Let them think they're winning. Then we close the trap." The first Council landing craft touched down outside the city of New Geneva. Thrixian warriors poured out, their purple shells gleaming in the morning light. They were the Council's shock troops, feared throughout the galaxy. They had never been defeated in ground combat. They advanced toward the city, expecting terrified civilians to flee before them. Instead, they found prepared defensive positions manned by veterans who had been practicing for this moment their entire lives. The first volleys cut through the Thrixian ranks like scythes through wheat. The warriors scrambled for cover, but there was no cover. The defenders knew every meter of this terrain. They had built it. They had trained on it. They had spent decades imagining exactly this scenario. Across Meridian 7, similar scenes played out. Every landing zone became a kill zone. Every advance was stopped by defenders who seemed to know exactly what the enemy would do before they did it. The Thrixian warriors were brave, but bravery meant nothing against prepared positions and superior tactics. Above the planet, Admiral Kreth watched his invasion crumble. His orbital bombardment was useless against the planetary shields. His ground forces were being destroyed, and his fleet was taking damage from weapons that weren't supposed to exist. "Order a withdrawal," he commanded through gritted teeth. "All ships, prepare to retreat to—" "Sir," his sensor officer interrupted. "Multiple hyperspace signatures incoming. It's the human main fleet." Kreth's 4 eyes went wide. "That's impossible. They can't have gotten here this fast." But there they were, over 1,000 human warships, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. They had pushed their engines beyond safe limits, burning fuel reserves that would take months to replenish. They had come to save their people, and nothing was going to stop them. Admiral Okonkwo's voice filled the Council command frequencies. "Council Fleet, this is Admiral Okonkwo. Your ground forces are being destroyed. Your orbital assault has failed. Your fleet is surrounded. You have one option. Surrender now, and you will be treated as prisoners of war. Continue fighting, and we will no longer show restraint." For a moment, Kreth considered refusing. The Valkyrie did not surrender. It was against everything his species believed in. But as he looked at the tactical display, at the human fleet that had just appeared behind him, at the weapons platform still firing from Meridian's orbit, at the reports of his ground forces being systematically eliminated, he understood something. This was not a battle he could win. This was not a battle anyone could win. The humans had been ready for everything. They had anticipated every move, prepared for every contingency. They were fighting not just with technology and training, but with something the Council had never encountered. They were fighting with love. Love for their world. Love for their people. Love for their homes and families and children. And that love had made them unstoppable. "All ships," Kreth said heavily. "Power down weapons and shields. Signal. Surrender." On the surface, the fighting continued for another hour before the last Thrixian units received the order to stop. By then, the damage had been done, not to the defenders of Meridian, who had suffered minimal casualties, but to the attackers. 12,000 humans had died in the orbital bombardment before the shields came up. 12,000 civilians, caught in the first moments before the defenses activated. Farmers, teachers, children, people who had done nothing wrong except live in a place that the Council wanted to use as a bargaining chip. General Chen walked through the ruins of a residential district near New Geneva. Bodies were still being recovered from the rubble. He had fought many battles in his long career, but he had never felt rage like this. Cold, quiet, purposeful rage. His communication device buzzed. It was Admiral Okonkwo. "General, the Council fleet has surrendered. The ground forces are being rounded up. Meridian is secure." "Secure," Chen repeated. 12,000 dead, Admiral. 12,000 of my people, my neighbors, my friends." There was a long pause. "I know, Marcus. I know. What happens now?" "Now we make sure this never happens again." On Axiom Prime, Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched the footage from Meridian with tears running down her face. The Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives of smaller species were openly condemning the attack. The Fenari delegation had walked out in protest. Even some Council members were expressing horror at what had been done. Archon Thress sat in his elevated seat, his 4 eyes fixed on the display showing the destruction. He had approved this attack. He had thought it was clever, a way to hurt humanity without facing their main fleet, a way to restore Council credibility. Instead, he had created a nightmare. Elena rose from her seat and walked to the central podium. She didn't wait for permission to speak. She didn't ask for the floor. She simply stood there, and the chamber gradually fell silent. "You gave us mercy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying through every speaker in the room. "At the border, we could have destroyed your fleet. We chose to disable them. We chose to let them live. We wanted peace. We wanted to prove that humanity wasn't like you." She looked directly at Thress. "You answered our mercy with murdered children." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "We didn't start this war," Elena continued. "We didn't want it. We would have been happy to live as equals among you, to share what we knew, to build something better together. But you couldn't accept that. You couldn't accept a galaxy where you weren't the masters and everyone else wasn't the slaves." She touched a control, and new images appeared on the screens. Human ships, moving through council space, not toward homeworlds, but toward military installations, bases, shipyards, weapons factories, every facility that supported the council's military power. So, the rules have changed, Elena said. We're not going to attack your worlds. We're not going to kill your people. But we are going to take away your ability to hurt anyone else. Every military installation outside your home systems will be destroyed. Every warship that isn't part of a home defense fleet will be eliminated. You wanted to see what humanity was capable of. Now you'll find out. Thress rose from his seat. This is an act of war. You cannot. War, Elena interrupted. You attacked our colony. You murdered 12,000 civilians. You tried to take hostages to force our surrender. We showed you mercy. And you showed us exactly what you think mercy is worth. Don't talk to me about war, Archon. You started this. We're going to finish it. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, chaos erupted. But Elena didn't look back. She had delivered humanity's message. Now it was time to let the fleet deliver the rest. Across council space, human ships struck without warning. Military installations that had stood for centuries vanished in nuclear fire. Shipyards that had built the vessels of conquest were reduced to debris. Weapons factories that had armed the soldiers of oppression were bombed until nothing remained. The council tried to respond, but their remaining forces were scattered and disorganized. Every time they gathered enough ships to mount a defense, human vessels appeared from unexpected directions and destroyed them. The stealth technology that had surprised them at the border proved just as effective in their own territory. On the Velkari homeworld, Archon Thress watched his empire's military power crumble. In 3 weeks, humanity accomplished what no species had done in 3,000 years. They broke the Council's ability to project force beyond its core systems. And through it all, they kept their word. Not a single Council civilian was harmed. Not a single colony was attacked. Not a single homeworld was threatened. The humans targeted only military assets, with surgical precision and overwhelming force. The message was clear. We could conquer you. We could destroy you. We could do everything you've done to others throughout your history. But we're not going to, because we're better than that. On Meridian 7, the survivors buried their dead. General Chen attended every funeral he could. He stood beside grieving families and said the same words again and again. They died protecting their home. They died so that others could live. They will never be forgotten. And in the quiet moments between the funerals, he looked up at the stars and wondered what kind of galaxy they were creating. Humanity had won, but at what cost? What would they become now that they had power? He thought about the Velkari and Thrixians, species that had started as defenders and become oppressors. Would humanity follow the same path? Or could they break the cycle? Only time would tell. But Chen believed, deep in his heart, that humanity was different. They had shown mercy when they didn't have to. They had restrained themselves when they could have conquered. They had proven that strength could be used for protection rather than domination. That was the lesson they were teaching the galaxy. That was the future they were building. One battle at a time. One choice at a time. One day at a time. The war wasn't over. But the most important battle had already been won. The battle for humanity's soul. And humanity had passed the test. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Meridian 7. Axiom Prime had been rebuilt. The old council chamber, a monument to 3,000 years of Valkyrie dominance, had been replaced with a new structure designed by architects from a dozen species. It was circular, with no elevated platforms, no seats of honor, no positions of obvious power. Every delegation sat at the same level. Every voice carried the same weight. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the assembled representatives of the galaxy. She was no longer simply an ambassador. The Reformed Council had elected her Secretary General, a position that hadn't existed a year ago. It was a role that demanded neutrality, wisdom, and the ability to bring together species that had been enemies for millennia. Elena was terrified. She was also more hopeful than she had ever been in her life. 1 year ago, she began, the galaxy looked very different. A few species ruled through force and intimidation. Smaller species survived by submitting to their demands. Conflicts were resolved through violence, and violence was rewarded with power. She looked around the chamber at faces from hundreds of worlds. Velkari and Thrixians sat beside Fenari and Kroth, Silicates and Melodari shared sections with species that had never had representation before. It was a sight that would have been impossible 12 months earlier. Humanity challenged that system, not because we wanted power for ourselves, but because we believed the galaxy could be better. We were told we were naive. We were told the galaxy had always been this way and always would be. We were told that might made right, and that any species strong enough to rule should do so. Elena paused. We disagreed. The chamber was silent. Every representative was listening. When we won our first battle, we could have pushed forward. We could have used our advantage to conquer, to dominate, to become the new masters of the galaxy. Instead, we offered peace. We showed mercy. We believed that if we proved there was another way, others would join us. She smiled slightly. We were right. The response had been gradual at first. The Fenari had been the first to formally ally with humanity. Then the Kroth. Then the Silicates. Species that had been oppressed by the Council for centuries saw in humanity something they had never encountered before. A powerful species that didn't abuse its power. The Melodari Consortium had provided economic support, helping to rebuild what the war had destroyed. The Ashenvari scholars had contributed their vast knowledge to developing new technologies that could be shared freely, rather than hoarded. Dozens of smaller species had stepped forward to offer what they could, and eventually, even the Velkari and Thrixians had come to the table. This new council is not perfect, Elena continued. We will make mistakes. We will disagree. We will sometimes fail to live up to our ideals. But we have something the old council never had. We have a shared commitment to building something better than what came before. In the Velkari section, a new delegation sat in place of Archon Thres, who had resigned in disgrace after the war. The new Archon, a younger Velkari named Velis, had campaigned on a platform of reform and reconciliation. She had won against strong opposition from traditionalists who wanted to restore Velkari dominance. The fact that she was here, in a chamber of equals, represented a fundamental shift in her species' culture. Queen Vethises of the Thrixians had not survived the political upheaval in her collective. A council of hive leaders now represented the Thrixian people, and they had chosen to embrace the new order rather than fight it. The Thrixians were warriors, but they were also pragmatists. When it became clear that the old ways would only lead to destruction, they adapted. The charter we have created together enshrines principles that should guide us for generations to come, Elena said. Equal representation for all member species. Economic cooperation rather than exploitation. Collective defense against external threats. But no more wars of conquest between members. Disputes resolved through negotiation and arbitration, not force. She held up a data tablet containing the new charter. This document represents the work of 1,000 diplomats from 200 species. Every line was debated, negotiated, and ultimately agreed upon by consensus. It is not perfect. No document could be. But it is ours. All of ours. Together, the Fenari delegation rose first. Elder Mika, her silver fur now streaked with white, led her people in a gesture of approval used in Fenari culture for millennia. Other delegations followed. The Kroth rumbled in their deep, subsonic voices. The Melodari chimed in harmonics that conveyed joy and hope. Even the Velkari and Thrixians added their voices to the chorus. Elena felt tears threatening and forced them back. There would be time for emotion later. Now was the time for strength. I declare the reformed Galactic Council in session, she announced. May we prove worthy of the trust placed in us. After the ceremony, Elena met with Admiral Okonkwo in a private chamber overlooking the station's gardens. He had officially retired from military service, but no one believed he was truly done. Men like Okonkwo never stopped protecting their people. You did well, he told her. Your grandmother would be proud. Elena smiled at the mention of her grandmother, who had died years before humanity's victory but had helped plant the seeds of everything that followed. She always said the hardest part wouldn't be winning. It would be what came after. She was right, Okonkwo agreed. Winning a war is simple compared to winning a peace. But I think we're on the right track. Do you really believe that? Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. I believe we've given the galaxy a chance to be better. Whether species take that chance is up to them. All we can do is set an example and hope others follow. Outside the window, ships from 100 worlds moved through the station's traffic lanes. trade vessels and passenger liners, diplomatic ships and science vessels. A year ago, many of these species had been enemies. Now they were partners, learning to work together, discovering what they had in common instead of fighting over their differences. "There's something I never told you," Okonkwo said. "Before the first battle, when I gave the order to disable the Council fleet instead of destroying it, I wasn't sure it was the right choice. Military logic said we should destroy them. Send the strongest possible message. Leave no ships to threaten us again. But you didn't," Elena said. "No, I didn't, because I kept thinking about what we were fighting for. If we became like them, what would be the point? We would just be the new tyrants, waiting for the next revolution. I decided that how we won mattered as much as whether we won." Elena nodded. "That decision saved everything. If we had destroyed that fleet, we would have united the galaxy against us instead of inspiring them to join us. Maybe," Okonkwo said, "or maybe they would have been too scared to resist. We'll never know. But I sleep better knowing we made the choice we did." Later that day, Okonkwo traveled to Meridian 7. The colony had been rebuilt, its cities rising from the ashes of council bombardment. A memorial stood in the center of New Geneva, listing the names of all 12,000 who had died in the attack. Okonkwo visited it whenever he could. General Chen was waiting for him at the memorial. The old soldier had finally truly retired, spending his days teaching young people the history of what had happened and why it mattered. "They're calling it the New Era," Chen said, gesturing at a group of students touring the memorial. "Teachers are already writing textbooks about how the old order fell and the new one rose." "How do the textbooks portray us?" Okonkwo asked. "As heroes, mostly. The species that stood up when no one else would. The species that showed strength through mercy." Chen shook his head. "I worry about that, honestly. Heroes become legends. Legends become myths. Myths lose the details that matter." "What details concern you?" "That we were scared," Chen said quietly. "That we almost didn't make it. That there were moments when we could have made different choices, worse choices, and everything would have turned out differently. The students see the victory. They don't see how close it was to being a disaster." Okonkwo watched the students studying the names on the memorial. They were young, born after the war, growing up in a galaxy that was learning to be peaceful. They would never know the fear of living under council dominance. They would never understand what it felt like to hide humanity's true strength for 200 years, never sure if the gamble would pay off. "Maybe that's okay," Okonkwo said finally. "Maybe the next generation doesn't need to carry our fear. Maybe it's enough that they remember the choice we made. Strength through mercy. Power used for protection, not domination. A galaxy of equals instead of masters and servants." "And what about when they're tested?" Chen asked. "What about when some new crisis comes and they have to make hard choices? Then they'll have to find their own answers," Okonkwo replied. "Just like we did. Every generation has its tests. All we can do is give them the values to guide their choices. The rest is up to them." A child broke away from the student group and ran toward the two old soldiers. She was perhaps 7 years old, with bright eyes and a fearless smile. "Are you Admiral Okonkwo?" she asked. "I am," he replied, kneeling to her level. "My teacher says you saved the galaxy. She says you were really brave." Okonkwo considered how to respond. "I had help," he said finally, "from a lot of very brave people. And we didn't save the galaxy alone. We just showed everyone that it was possible. They did the rest." The child nodded solemnly, as if this answer made perfect sense. Then she ran back to her group, leaving the two old men alone with the memorial. "Strength through mercy," Chen murmured, watching her go. "Maybe it really is that simple." "Simple to say," Okonkwo agreed. "Harder to practice, but worth trying to live by." They stood together in silence, surrounded by the names of the fallen, watching the children of Meridian learn about the past. Above them, stars shone in a sky that was, at long last, at peace. The galaxy had learned an ancient human truth. The most dangerous people were not those who sought power. They were those who had been patient enough, determined enough, and principled enough to wait for the right moment to set things right. Humanity had waited. Humanity had won. And now humanity was helping to build a future where no species would ever have to wait alone again. That was the legacy worth protecting. That was the story worth telling. That was the lesson the galaxy would carry forward into all the generations to come. The Council had pushed too far. Humanity had stopped playing nice. And in the end, everyone had found something better than victory. They had found hope.